Hi everyone. This is the Story of God, and it's a tool that we found a while back, a great study that we found a while back that is beneficial for everyone, not just confirmation age, but I've seen 60-year-old adults who have gone through this study and just had light bulbs going off because of it. I mean, they've been Christians their whole life and still just like have these aha moments. And so the Story of God is just a really quick overview or kind of walk through the Bible, but it's not one that just kind of glosses over stuff and just says, here's the facts. It's one where you really get to think about it, really have a conversation with each other about this, and I'll kind of guide you through some questions and everything too. Now, in these first two sessions, I'm going to read the story and then kind of go through some of the questions and give you just basically some of the things to pick up on. In the class, when we're sitting down together, you'll really have that chance to talk with each other and just have a good conversation with each other as I pose some of these questions to you all. So go ahead and just listen here. This is actually how I even started off. Instead of just starting straight into the story, I like to ask this question: that if you could imagine the world the way it should be, what would it be like? And I think that's a really a huge question, and one that when we asked it a couple weeks ago of our confirmation class, they had some just great answers. That there'd be no more war, no more fighting, even just between people. That everything would just be perfect. And it's really hard sometimes to have that concept of what perfection looks like. But there really was a time when everything was perfect. And that's where this all starts. So I'm going to start here with our first section of this story of God. This story is found in the Bible and is about God, a being that was before all things, and created this earth and everything on it. God alone always does what is good and right and perfect. The Bible calls him holy. That's something you'll want to remember, that God is good, right, and perfect. Well, while God was creating the foundations of the earth, angels watched with amazement, singing together and shouting for joy. God created these beautiful angels to worship him. But some of these angels rebelled against God and his ways. Any rebellion against God is called sin. God will not allow sin to remain in his presence. So, he sent the rebellious angels into darkness on the earth to face final punishment later. Then, God decided he would create another being, one that was lower than the angels, called a human. So God took the earth and prepared it as a place for humans to live. His Spirit moved over the face of the earth as he made light, separating it from the darkness. He divided the oceans and the sky. He gathered the waters so dry land would appear. He grew plants, flowers, and trees with seeds to reproduce themselves. He created the sun, the moon, and the stars, setting the days and the seasons into motion. He filled the seas with fish, the sky with birds, and the earth with all kinds of wild animals. God put great care and creativity into all of his creation. Then he looked at everything and said, "This is good." After he had prepared the earth, God said, "Let us make humans in our image to be like us. They will be in charge of the earth and the plants and the animals that live on it." So, God formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed his own breath into him, giving him life. This man would be called Adam. Later, God created the first woman, Eve, from one of Adam's ribs, to be a companion and helper for Adam. So God created both the man and the woman in his own image. God blessed the man and the woman with the ability to continue creating through having children. He told them, "Be fruitful and multiply." He placed the humans in a beautiful garden, a place where they had everything they needed to live life to the fullest. In the center of the garden, God placed two special trees. One was the tree of life, and the other was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God said that Adam and Eve could eat from any tree in the garden except for one, the tree that would give them the knowledge of good and evil. He warned them not to eat from this tree, or they would surely die. Daily, God would come and spend time with the humans, walking with them in the cool of the day. He showed them how to live in the best possible way, a life lived close to God and under His protection, a life that is full and complete. And Adam and Eve loved being with God. As God looked over all of His creation, He thought, "This is very good." After creating all this, God rested, and He set aside a day of rest each week for His creation. All right, now at this point in the study, after we've heard that part of the story, we go through and we ask some questions and just kind of spend some time having a conversation on it. Now again, I'm just going to go through the questions and kind of give you some insights and things that maybe to pick up on from the story. Now again, this isn't having your Bible cracked open. This is just listening and hearing it all, because this is kind of an oral tradition and a way in which just how Moses and all these guys way back when, how they would pass on this story and all the things that happened. It was this oral tradition. None of this was written down until Moses came along and decided, this is a good idea, we should write this down. But all before that, for generations, they would just pass this on and just help people to remember the story. So we're kind of going back to that, and you'll find that at the very end of all this, you're going to know this front and back, and it's all taken straight from the Bible, so you'll know it. One last thing is, don't jump ahead. The only rule I kind of lay out is that when we ask and talk about these questions and the story, we can only talk about what we've covered so far. So for today, for this session, it's just covering all this up to where God rested. The next session, will be whatever that next session is, plus you can go back to all this in creation and everything. But until then, it's just only what we've discussed. So don't jump ahead. You might want to go to places things about you know about, that you're thinking about. And there were a lot of good questions while we were going through this, but I had to kind of keep deferring them and say, you know what, maybe we'll get there later in the story. So here we go. Here's the first question. How did God make humans unique among His creation? I'll give you a second to think about it, and then I'll just kind of give you a couple insights here too. You'll pick up in the story that there were several things that He said, that they were made in God's image, right? God said, "So let us make humans in our image to be like us. They will be in charge of the earth and the plants and the animals that live on it." So there too, you see that they're over all of the plants and the animals and everything. God sets them up to be up above that. Another thing, I thought this one really hit me when I went through it the very first time. It was that humans are made to be a little bit lower than the angels. I don't know if you picked up on that. God decided that He would create another being, one that's lower than the angels. That's what it said in the story, and you can go and you can find that in the book of Hebrews, but you don't have to go jump there. Another is that God breathed into Adam, right? When he formed Adam out of the dust of the ground, he hand made him. All the other animals, and everything else in creation, He just spoke into existence. But Adam, and then also with Eve, He handcrafted them, and then He breathed life into them. And one more thing to kind of note and to take note of here is that that Adam, well, he was given this charge to be fruitful and multiply. So God wanted him to make more, to have babies. That was his command to them. Now that's not really different maybe from among his creation. He actually wants all of his creation to reproduce in that way. But I mean, he does give a command here to Adam and Eve to do that. Here's the second question. How do we know humans were created good? Hopefully you'll recall in the story, of course, God is the one declaring it, right? He's the one saying, well, this is good. Well, how do we know that God is good? If you remember from the very first part of the story, it said that God alone always does what is good and right and perfect. And I said, you need to remember that, because that does come up in the story a bunch, that God is good, right, and perfect. He's holy. Okay, that's a really good kind of definition or way to remember what holy means. He's good, right, and perfect. So that's one that he declares it. He says, hey, this is good. Actually, he even said with the humans, he said, they're very good. This is very good. But we also see that if he's good, right, and perfect, and the humans are made in his image, well, then they also must be good, right, and perfect, at least to some extent. Now, of course, less than God, because they're the creation, he's the creator. But, we see that they also have this characteristic about them as well. Here's the third question. Who do you view yourself to be? And what makes up your identity? So this is kind of taking a little bit of a detour from our story, but kind of helping you to think about this on your own, just how it affects you. Who do you view yourself to be? And what makes up your identity? What kind of roles or family things, or is it your abilities or your occupations? Is it other people or the way that they view you? What is it that makes up your identity? And how important are those things on making up your identity? And that's one I can't really answer for you, so I just want you to kind of think about that. If you even just need to pause it, just stop and just think about it for a little while, that'd be a good thing. You can just kind of say, yeah, what really tells me who I am, or makes me say, this is who I am. Well, and here's the fourth question to kind of follow that up. It says, be honest. What identity in your life currently provides the most powerful dose of self-worth? So in other words, what is, out of all those things that you just kind of said to yourself, yeah, this is who, or this is what makes me who I am, which of those things gives you just that biggest boost of self-confidence or self-worth, and says, yep, that's the one. These others, they contribute to who I am, but this is the one. Again, just kind of think about that, and then we'll go on to the next question. So what would change if our identity depended on the image of God for our worth? Hear that question again. What would change if our identity depended on the image of God for our worth? In other words, if we solely said, what, my identity is wrapped up in the fact that I am made in God's image, I think that would probably have a pretty profound change and impact on how we all view ourselves. And we wouldn't let some of these other things that aren't quite as sure, or that are more shaky, tell us who we are. Instead, we'd say, wow, I see that I'm made in God's image, and made after him and his likeness, and who he is, and what makes him up, that he's good, right, and perfect, and that's what he wants me to be. Now, that'd be a pretty big mind shift, I think. Well, here's the sixth question. What kind of relationship did God have with the humans? Think about that one again for just a second. Here's some of the things that you can maybe pick up on in the story. The kind of relationship he had with the humans is that it was a very close one, right? I mean, he spent time with Adam and Eve. They loved being with him. He walked, right down there with them. He was in the garden walking around with them and talking with them. We see that he's very intimate in how he creates them, things like that. He even gives them, a day of rest. He's looking out for their best interest, right? He's saying, hey, you need a break. I need a break, but you need a break as well. So he makes that whole last day is just a day of rest. He gives them responsibility too. His whole intention with making them is to put them up above the animals and everything, but so that they would take care of them, so that they would take care of his creation, and that they would also, if they're made in God's image, be also creative, much like God. He showed them the best possible way to live, right? I mean, I don't know if you caught that or not in the story, but it said, that God was walking with them in the cool of the day. He showed them how to live in the best possible way, a life lived close by God. A life lived close to God and under his protection, a life that's full and complete. And again, that's a big thing to remember, to really pick up on, that what he's intended here is for them to know what life is really to be like with God. He also protected them from evil, and they just loved being with him. They just loved being with God. Now, here's something else. What kind of relationship did Adam and Eve have with each other? Think about that for a second. Going back to that very original question, the very beginning, where I said, what if if this world could be perfect, what would it look like? I think this is one of those, that this is what it kind of looked like with Adam and Eve. There was nothing between them, no fighting, no, definitely no backstabbing or talking bad about each other, nothing like that. Not even thinking bad about each other. Which is just kind of crazy, but there is literally nothing between them. I mean, literally nothing between them. No clothes even, right? I mean, they were naked. They were not ashamed. They just, it was the way they thought life should be. The way they knew God created us this way. This is what it should be like. And so there's nothing between them. Not just relationship-wise or not physically either. And so that was really good. Life was really good together. Another question is, what do you think is significant about the two trees in the center of the garden? Did you pick up on that? Let me go back and just kind of tell you that part again. So in the center of the garden, God placed two special trees. One was the tree of life, and the other was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God said that Adam and Eve could eat from any tree in the garden except for one, the tree that would give them the knowledge of good and evil. He warned them not to eat from this tree, or they would surely die. So what's significant about those two trees? Here's another question for you. Do you think that humans were created to live forever? What shows us this in the story? I mean, do you think that they were created to live forever? This was a good one that we had in a class, a good conversation on this. And at first, a couple people are like, no, I don't think so. I don't think people were created to live forever. But as we kind of went through it a little bit more and started taking a look here, God creates them and says this is very good, right? He's walking with them. He's protecting them. He's giving them. He wants to teach them what life should be like. Life that's full and complete. It's one of those things where yeah, it's pretty clear that God wanted us to live forever. He didn't intend for death to be part of what happens in this world. And I mean, that was a huge thing for me a long while back too. And I remember, a funeral I had for someone. It was one of the first funerals I had, but I had to just reassure the person, because they were really angry at God and everything. I was just like, you know what? God hates death too. He never wanted it. He never wanted it to be part of what happens here. I mean, when he told Adam and Eve, stay away from that tree of the knowledge of good and evil, because if you eat of it, you will die. But he never intended that or wanted that to happen. He never planned for that to happen, and so, or at least never desired for it to happen. So anyway, I mean, it's there they are, and they are experiencing life forever right there already with God, which is just pretty amazing. Well, what do we learn about God in this scene? This is the 10th question. What do we learn about God in this scene? Well, we learn a lot of things here, really. I'm just going to kind of go through them real quick, but just kind of, again, take notes, mental notes. This is not writing down kind of notes. Just think about this. Okay, well, God is the source of all blessing, right? I mean, He's the one that creates all these animals and creates the people, and He's the one that's blessing them by saying, this is good. This is very good. God's all powerful, right? I mean, He's the one that's creating everything there in the first place. So He's all powerful. He's the creator of everything. God created humans in His image. And that's something that, again, is just kind of mind-blowing. What does that look like? What does that mean? I mean, I guess, you could look in a mirror to some degree and say, well, is that what God kind of looks like? Does He have human characteristics kind of like me? A face, hands, arms, stuff like that? I mean, the Bible does talk about a lot of stuff like that, so maybe. But I'd say for sure, being created in His image was to be good, right, and perfect, following after how He is good, right, and perfect. And in our relationships, especially with Him, but also with each other, that's what the case would be. Well, also, God showed the humans how to live in the best possible way, right? I mean, He's teaching them what life should be like. He's not just kind of saying, well, go figure it out on your own. He's walking with them and He's teaching them it. Also, God trusts humans with the care of His creation. He told them not just be fruitful and multiply, but take care of the creation. He made them above the animals and everything so that they could take care of it. And God gives humans the ability to create. He also says not just be fruitful and multiply, right? I mean, that's one way into kind of, at least that we could say that they procreate. That's the word that we use today. But really, He's also telling them to be creative, to in how they work and in how they play and interact and everything. He intended them to be creative as well. And so, especially if you're an artist, or you have those kind of artist kind of leanings and inclinations, you're maybe good at music or something like that. Those are all ways of being creative. Even just expressing yourself through poetry or through words and everything. That's a way of being creative. So I definitely encourage y'all in that as well. Also, God gives humans the ability to create. Or I'm sorry, I read that one again. He provides and takes care of humans. The garden had everything that they needed. So He set them here in this place. And this was another thing we talked about in class, was He didn't make them to be babies, right? He made them to be adults. And so they weren't completely helpless, but at the same time, He still takes care of them. He provides for them. He gives them all the food and everything they need right there in the garden, so that way they wouldn't have to try to figure out how does this all work, or also have to work hard to make it work, to make it happen, to have food. One more thing, or actually two more things here, I guess, real quick, about that we learn about God. That God enjoys His creation. I mean, He said it was excellent in every way, right? He said this is very good. And also he sets aside time for rest. We said that a little while ago, but that's another thing to really pick up on there. He rests on that last day. He's saying, this is a good thing to take a break. And I know that's a tough thing for us today, but we need to do that today as well. We need to take a break and really just sometimes relax. And again, be creative is a good way of also relaxing. All right, well, just a couple more questions here. So what do we know so far about the meaning of life? Why are we here? Now, again, you could, and we did a little bit in class, just kind of left it open, and some people just started going all over the place with it, but I want you to kind of come back to the story here. Why are we here? What are we made for? And so I want to kind of direct you back to the story. And so when God said, let us make humans in our image to be like us, that they will be in charge of the earth and the plants and the animals that live on it. Well, part of it sure is to take care of the creation, right? To be people who take care of the world. But another part is to worship Him, to reflect and to love Him the way that He's created us. Going back even before that, we saw with the angels, right? He created them in a much similar way. While God was creating the foundations of the earth, angels watched with amazement, singing together and shouting for joy. Right? That's what it said in the story. And so, these angels are worshiping Him. And if we're a little bit lower than the angels, that doesn't mean that we're off the hook and worshiping Him. If anything, it means all the more we should be right up there with them and saying, man, wow, God, you are amazing, that you have created us, that you have made us. And so we want to worship you and reflect who you are all the more. Well, if the story does not center on us, but on God, after all, it is called the story of God, right? How do we find our purpose to life? What are humans doing with Him in the story? Now, that's a big question. Let me read it one more time here. So if this story does not center on us, but on God, how do we find our purpose to life? What are humans doing with Him in the story? Well, here's again something hopefully you're picking up on in the story, is that they're learning from Him. They're walking with Him, right? They're enjoying God. And so it's just kind of that simple, right? Spending time with Him, living in His ways, walking with God and saying, wow, this is what life is supposed to be like. Wow, God, this is actually good. Things go well when I live life the way that the way that you want it to be lived. I can treat others the way, not just that I want to be treated, but the way that you want them to be treated. And then in turn, I find that they actually treat me much the same way, with respect and with love and things like that. And so, it's when we're living life with God and according to His ways, it's like, wow, things really work out. Well, one last question here. How does living this life with God, how does that contrast to the way that people think in our culture today? And you know what? I'm just going to leave you with that. And I'm going to leave you to think about that. To kind of really reflect on that, your own. Of how does this living with God, walking with Him and living according to His ways, how does that contrast to the way that people think in our culture today? You can stop it here, you can pause it here, what have you, but I'm going to go ahead and leave you here. And thanks for spending some time here in the story of God. Continue thinking about that question, and what would life really look like if we were living more according to His ways in the image of God. So we'll see you next time.